saying now. So welcome to today's webinar and thank you for joining. And if at all possible, we would love to see your faces, also because we'll be opening the floor for some discussions later on. It will be with me, but it will be with our expert today, which is Anne-Mette Hjalager from Southern University of Denmark. So Anne-Mette, the floor is yours and thank you for joining today.
Thank you very much. So I'll try to share my screen. Yeah.
And while you're sharing your screen, I can just say, in case you guys have any questions, you're very welcome to either raise your hand or write them in the chat. And then we'll also be here. I'll be here to answer any of your questions in the chat while Anne-Mette is talking.
Okay, and thank you very much for letting me into your webinar today. It's really a great pleasure to be able to come and talk a bit about funding, how to get money for business. I'm a professor at the University of Southern Denmark. I've been working with tourism for quite a long time, many different aspects of tourism, primarily innovation in tourism, but other things come up as well. And when we're talking about innovation, and it always includes some kind of funding discussion as well. Very often when we're talking about funding, the first thing that will come to your mind is, where can I get money from? Where's the pile of money that I can get my hands on? But I would like to introduce to you a slightly, no, can we, I cannot shift the slide. What's happening?
Maybe it got stuck anyway. If you try to
here we are.
Here we go. Yes, now we can see it.
I would like to give you a slightly broader perspective of entrepreneurial funding resources, a slightly bigger picture, because funding is not only the public funds or the funds from NGOs or whatever, it's quite a lot of things. So we will also try to discuss a bit how to match funding with your needs, your personality. There's a whole funding landscape if we're talking about public funds, etc. But and I would just open the floor about discussion about the EU funding opportunities. Then more or less the last thing is what makes a successful funding application? What are the do's and don'ts? So let's start with the important entrepreneurial funding resources to make the bigger picture and try to think about some of the advantages and disadvantages. And the first thing I would try to point your view on is about, well, you might have own savings. And that's actually one of the primary funding resource at all, and you have to think about it. So perhaps you might, during a work life or somehow else, inheritance or whatever, you might have some funding that you can put into your investment. And the advantage is, of course, you will be 100% in control. You can and this funding of your own can be used to co-finance other funding. That's the beauty of it. But the disadvantage is, of course, unless you're a very rich person, own funding is normally a very limited resource. But if we continue a bit, there might also be other funding opportunities, informal investors, family and friends who might want to help you. It's perhaps you might go to your parents. Can you borrow me some money for a period of time? And most parents will, if they have the possibility for it, be willing to to lend funding for you. Perhaps it's easy to acquire, but there might not be so many requirements if it's family, friends. If they rely on your personality or your project, you can go for it. But there might also, as a disadvantage, there might come up some disagreement, some distrust that you will not want to have if these people are close to you. So it should be considered carefully, of course. Bamboo networks, perhaps you don't know what that means. Actually, it was a colleague who introduced that word for me. Thinking about ethnic community funding. He did some studies in Chinese communities in Europe, and I think that's why he called it bamboo networks. And you think about the scaffolding in bamboos in developing countries, bound together in many kinds of ways, and it's a very stable, flexible kind of structure. So that's why he called it bamboo networks. But if you come from ethnic communities, there might actually be some networks which are willing to finance endeavors in the peer group. But of course, you have to be part of the peer group. You want to remain there, and you have to tolerate perhaps some cultural rules of various kinds. But it might be a way to actually acquire some funding. The next one is retained capital. It's if you often think about serial entrepreneurs, people who start one enterprise and let it get going, and then get interested in a new type of enterprise, and funding acquired from the already perhaps profitable enterprise can go into the development of a new enterprise. So this is a way that you might get going. Perhaps this is not too risky, and particularly if you want to make a difference. But it's just, of course, depending on some kind of long-term investment profile that you should, of course, have some profitable enterprise already. And if you're a young investor, that might not be the case. The next one, the business angels, people who have gone out of, sold off an enterprise and want to invest in new enterprises. They have money to play with, I would say. And one of the advantages is that people of this type could actually want to supply you with senior advice. These are experienced persons who really want to promote success. This is also, and one of the disadvantages is that you have to give equity to these people. These people want ownership, and you have to decide whether you want to give that away. If we proceed in this list, and I hope I'm not tiring you too much, but I want you to see the whole picture. But there's also retail banking. Well, you might go to your bank and say, I want some investment. I really want to make some investments quickly, get hold of a lease, for example, or something like that. And your bank, if you are a good and solid customer, can actually get you a quick access to funding. But there might also be strict requirements and high interest rates. They might ask for collateral. You might have to go to friends, family, and say, "Will you guarantee for this loan?" If we proceed, we come to the venture capital. They are risk-seeking kind of investments. They really want to bring growth to the next stage. They want to see that you already in business, that you already have some achieved some success, that you have already reached some level of expertise. But they can also bring in new expertise, help you to speed up growth. It's also equity-based, and you also have to expect that they want a price for the investment. And it's mainly for enterprises already of some size. And that's even more the case when we talk about the public floating, the stock market, and that is not for very small enterprises. Then we come to the thing that you might actually think that I'm talking most about today. That's the governmental subsidies. And one of the things is that if you are within the target group, if you can actually deliver to the targets of the funding, there might be some accessibility within this group. But it's also conditioned by demands of various kinds. You should actually be within the field that is demanded. But there's also a demand for co-financing, usually in the least. You might also think about commercial partnerships. For example, teaming up with a supplier or a type of enterprise which have some identical features. It can be a good strategic match. If you have friends, other types of enterprises, it could be a kind of joint pull towards some growth, some market strength. But it can also be a limitation, of course, because you will have to make some kind of partnership agreements, perhaps limiting other partnership alliances. Crowdfunding, well, it's a community access and possibility. Crowdfunding is, of course, getting money into the enterprise, but the beauty of the crowdfunding platform is that there is also a kind of access to marketing. There is a stream of marketing opportunities in the same field. When you look for crowdfunding money, there are also high demands on communication. You should really be able to communicate to the customers and with them all the time. And there are ethical dimensions as well. You should deliver on ethics. Leasing, it's also a possibility for financing. It's, it means that you will not have to bind a lot of capital into, for example, machinery, into property, because you will lease it, you will pay along the way. But leasing prices may also be high. Factoring, well, it's a way to quick funding, and that will be you sell off your demands, economic demands to a company which will then go to get your customers to pay them instead of you. So they will lend you the money in the while when you are waiting for your customers' payments. But of course, they will also ask a fee to take this risk on board. And the last one, which might be interesting and is interesting for quite a few, particularly platform-oriented businesses, it's a subscription, where the customers actually pay in advance to cover some production costs.
Nuestra Carla aquí
El
abajo.
profesor no sabe el número de teléfono, no les puede preguntar.
Anne-Mette, I think we lost your audio. I think you have to unmute again. There
Can
we
you
go.
hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Very good. If you use a subscription, you will, of course, there will be an obligation to deliver, that's clear, but deliver at a later stage. So you cannot go bankrupt in the meantime. Okay, I hope you see the point that there are many possibilities to finance, and it's not only about one possibilities, you can use several of these at the same time. Yes, let's see if I can, oops. What kind of capital supply would you prefer? It depends so much on you as your personality, your project, and the stage of development. Not all these possibilities will be relevant for you or accessible for you. So you will have to consider the type of enterprise and what you want to do. There's a small test here. You can take it afterwards. It's not 100% good, but it will give you perhaps some indication of what kind of entrepreneur you are, and give you some hints of what kind of funding would be most feasible for you. And I'll just skip through the types of entrepreneurs that this test can put you into, more or less, and there are also some variation across, so perhaps you will not be 100% one of these entrepreneur types. But this one is the first, called solely entrepreneur. This is, well, the classical type of entrepreneurship, where you give up your regular job and put all your emphasis into it, where you work extremely hard and where you take on board the risks of entrepreneurship. So this is well, the type of personality that you are, well, you really think it is worthwhile doing this effort, having and running the business. The solo entrepreneur is, well, the type of person that, well, you really want to be on your own. You don't want to be dependent on other people. You like to do it in your way, in your speed. You might actually be able to do with less money, work in all trades as well. And you also want to take all the decisions yourself. You want to finance yourself, and that's what you will enjoy. A webpreneur, also some of, well, the modern types of enterprises also want to be independent, perhaps, and use the internet as a main platform for marketing, for sales, for collaboration, etc. So if you are an IT expert or want to become one, or if you have a product or an idea that is really feasible for the web, that might be the way that you can work. Perhaps you will even be a digital nomad. You can have your enterprise wherever in the world. Yeah. The next one, the mompreneur or the dadpreneur. If you want to combine your enterprise with family values, it might also be possible. perhaps working part-time. Let's have perhaps some similarities with the solo entrepreneurs, but it could actually be a mom and dad together in a joint enterprise. Who knows? The socialpreneur, so making a social enterprise, a total other type of business enterprise, but also upcoming. It doesn't mean that you have to work for free necessarily. Working in NGOs can also create jobs of various kinds. The multi-preneur, it can be a serial enterprise establishment, so that you will start something, try to get it profitable, create a surplus which can then be invested in new enterprises. Yeah. Okay. I would like to just stop for a moment and open the floor a bit for questions. And I would also ask you, perhaps some of you, can you see yourself in some of these entrepreneurial roles? And are there any of the types of funding that you have particularly good experience with? Hard questions.
And here I can maybe just say you are very welcome to unmute yourself, or if you feel more comfortable with it, write it in the chat and I will read it out loud.
Yeah. I would like to hear your voices. I hear some of you. Mayu, do you have any experience? I'm putting a bit of pressure on you, but and don't.
Actually, hello, I am
Yes,
Mario.
hello.
Yeah, I am not the entrepreneur. I am working in the chamber. So
Okay.
some kind of experience I already have. But mostly I'm consulting companies, so
Yeah.
yeah.
But when you see the types of entrepreneurs that you are meeting, what are their main funding problems and aspirations? Can you say something about that?
Actually, the lack of money is always a problem for small companies, and they cannot find information about fundings.
Okay, so they come to you to find the information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else do we have? Asko, do you have any points for us about funding? Simona, then. Seems to be a little shy people, or what? Anyone else?
Asko writes not yet in the chat, but I'm assuming that perhaps after this webinar he might have.
Who's there?
That was Asko writing in the chat.
He's writing what?
Oh, you were asking him if he had any input on the funding, and he writes not yet.
No, okay. How about Bianca?
Yes, so I'm an entrepreneur, so probably a multi-entrepreneur. I never used any funding before. I always put my own money in every idea and every project. So it would be helpful to have some information about what kind of fundings we can use it.
So are you planning for some growth where your own funding will not reach, and where you have to actually look for other funding opportunities?
I'm just checking what are the possibilities. I'm doing like 2-3 businesses. One is like has already a history and no need funding actually. The other one is just a starting business, which I have my own funding for it at the beginning, but then I will see how it goes and I might use some possibilities or investors. So yeah, I'm very beginning with the second project.
Very good. Katri, do you have any comments at this point? Your own experience?
Hello.
Yeah.
Actually, it's very interesting to listen you and to get more information. I don't have any questions. I'm just listening and thinking. So it's but about the foundations. It's also I have my own business and I usually put my own money on it. So it's not easy to find co-foundations. Even now for this Tourban project, we need some co-foundations with maybe we try to cooperate with city council, but it's not so easy. So if you have any ideas that you can give, what how to do it better or how to ask, so I'm very pleased.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I think then we might want to continue, and please reserve any questions that you might have or comments, because I think there will be a little time later for you to raise any questions or concerns or come up with your own experience. So let's continue. What I would like to raise your attention to, and I think it is very much in line with what you say, Katri, what should we consider if we are looking for money and it is difficult. And if we get into the shoes of the investors, we can try to anticipate what kinds of questions they would want to ask you. They will ask you about your market. For example, who is the best type of customer? And you can just well try to consider that. Who's my best type of customer? They will, of course, they will also ask how big is your market and how can you know how big your market is? For example, market share is possibly not a good term for small enterprises because the big market is so big that it doesn't make any good sense to talk about a market share. But still, we can consider how big is the market in our town, in our street, whatever is relevant. We can also expect questions like, why is this the right time for this product or this service? What's going on right now in this place with this type of product or service? And of course, how is your PR marketing strategy? That's what they would like to ask about the market. But they have many more questions. For example, about your history as an entrepreneur. Oh, that is really nosy, this. And they will, of course, if you have a present turnover, if you are not entirely new, how is it composed, your present turnover? Who is contributing to your turnover? But also experience cost related to marketing. Are you really investing in increasing your turnover? They might also want to know what kind of user feedback you have on your product or service, and you can try to keep hold of that. There's look in various kinds of electronic feedback, but also making continuous notes on what your customers are remarking. What holds you back from growing more than this? Perhaps this is more about the personality. Perhaps you do not want to grow immensely. Perhaps, as we saw on in the entrepreneurial types, you want to be solo or with your partner or whoever, and you do not want to grow a lot. And you have to be able to explain why you want to grow or not. Who are you? Who's your team? Who are the collaborators? It could, of course, be staff if you have any, but it can also be those other people you might relying on, the suppliers, important suppliers, could be essential for you. Do you have a board? It couldn't be an advisory board, or it could be a board connect to ownership, but even if you have an advisory board, it could be more easy to establish and of importance for you. And of course, what types of experience do you have, and what do you lack? Perhaps you have some lacking experience in finance, or you lack experience in fields which is important in a technical sense for your future. They might ask about the competition. Who are the competitors? It can be the direct competitors who are down the road having the same type of enterprise, but it could also be indirect competitors. For example, substitution, where the customers can choose to some entirely different product or service to fulfill the same need. What is the price level compared to others? Sometimes people are asking too high prices for their products. But in my experience, when I work with entrepreneurs, very often they are asking too low prices, and not at the least in tourism. It seems as if many entrepreneurs feel a bit of pity for their customers. Oh, they shouldn't be paying too much, and and that is, of course, not sensible if you want an enterprise up and running. So try to get the price level right compared with the quality that you deliver. And how do you actually compare quality features with others? Try to figure out what is your enterprise compared with the others. Oh, they will ask a lot more questions, and not the least about finances, of course. They want a return for their funding. What kind of costs do you have in relevant categories? What are the markings of different products and services, and how can you actually calculate it? Do you have registration systems that can actually calculate it? What prior funding has gone into your business, and where does it come from? And they might be impressed with you if you have been able to put own funding into your business and raised the funding, and but put funding already through that. And of course, what will the additional funding be used for? Very fundamental. What if you do not get the money that you asked for? How would you actually develop the company? Will it remain stable as it is, or would you want to ask for money in other places? Will the growth be perhaps slower than anticipated? What are the biggest risks with this investment? How much do you take out for yourself monthly? Oh, that's a nosy question. If they want to invest in you, they don't want you to see the next month with the biggest Mercedes on the market, of course. And who's your accountant? And how do you actually work with her? Yes, a lot of nice questions. These are all questions that you can just try to go through them, all of them, and see, can you actually answer this question? And even if you're not looking for funding, these are useful questions to be able to answer. You were asking about, do you have any ideas of funding? There's a lot of funding out there, and of course I do not have the time to go through all kinds of things, and I couldn't possibly do it. You are from many different countries, and the funding landscape is different. But I would like to just to scratch the surface of some of the EU funding, and I find this figure quite illustrative. This is the total EU budget from 2021 to 2027. So that's a period that we are working in right now. And you will see that there are two really, really big bubbles here. The orange one, which is the agricultural funding. And you are urban people, so unless you do vertical gardening or agriculture, this might not actually be for you. But it's really absurd, I would say, how much funding is into agriculture and rural activities. But the other one, the blue one, is far more interesting for you. It's a regional fund where there's also money for urban activities and the social funds and a few other things that you can see there. There's also the other blue one in the bottom, which could be interesting if you are working with countries, accessing countries. Actually, I have myself, I got some money out of that, that bubble by offering a consultancy for Baltic countries. So there are a lot of money in there for various kinds, but I think the big blue bubble is actually the most interesting. But the logics in the EU funding is that the EU would set some political priorities, and you really have to take care of these political, what will the EU want solved in our community, and you have to contribute to that if you should ever get any hope of getting money. But it's most of the funding, the national authorities are actually implementing the funding. So you will have to go to your own country to get hold of funding. There are some funding which is applied directly at the EU, but most of the funding will be accessible through national categories. This is a good place to go, Enterprise Europe Network, and it's accessible for all. And this is a place where you can actually get your overview of the EU funding. This is a point of access. Remember that. I hope that you will get the PowerPoints afterwards. Caroline, she's nodding. So you can go back to them. Just to tell you some overview of the social funds, what can the social funding support? This is about access to employment, including for underrepresented groups, ethnic minorities, or people late in their careers or very early in their careers or whatever. So if you have something going on for which can help these people, or there might be funding in it here. Increasing female labor market participation and enhancing access to affordable quality childcare of relevance to some member countries more than others. Skills and lifelong learning for all with a focus on green and digital transition. also, well, learning opportunities and developing competencies, developing knowledge, etc. is interesting here. Tackling poverty and social exclusion, food and basic material assistance for the most deprived, and social innovation. And of course, these are really fluffy terms, fluffy activities. But in your country, there might actually be partners for you to align with. Social fund projects are often started by, for example, vocational training institutions, NGOs, etc. And you can look for opportunities as an entrepreneur to collaborate with these organizations. They might actually make open calls for enterprises, calling in and looking for interest among enterprises to get into project activities. And you might get a small share of a project in your specialty together with other people. There's another guide, I think that was on the Tourban website as well, mentioned there, because the EU is actually trying to also to direct people who are interested in tourism for relevant programs that they could go for. And for example, the Creative Europe program, and that's one of the programs which is not coordinated nationally, where you have to establish a team, a group of project holders, and apply directly with the EU. Or the Digital Europe program, which supports a digital transformation, or the EU Invest program, which seeks investments to strengthen tourism competitiveness, sustainability, and its value chain. Again, fluffy concepts where you really have to go deep into the material to find whether it has a fit somehow with your project. The Cohesion Objectives, these are in the regional foundation. I think that you might actually find that the regional funds, and the social fund, but also Interreg could be of interest for you. So again, I'm launching some of the smart and fluffy words: a smarter Europe, innovative and smart economic transformation. If you, for example, are a specialist in IT, VR, AR, whatever is out there, there might be something in it for you here. A green, low carbon Europe, a more connected Europe, and something about mobility and regional ICT connectivity. The social thing, which is implemented in the social funds, which I already talked about. And Europe closer to the citizens, now in the sustainability and integrated development of urban, remind this, rural and coastal areas through local initiatives. And then you will have to look for actors in your local communities for that. This is another important place of getting an overview of funding programs in urban areas, your cities, and here's a link as well. I have to say that, well, the programming period from 2021 to 2027 of the EU program is still ongoing. Sometimes it seems a bit odd that well, you have the funds, but it's the national authorities are not totally finalized with finding out what would they like to be undertaken. So you can take contact with your national points of access to to get some interesting examples. This is just, this is one of the smart tourism projects, just to give you a small impression of what's going on and which is being funded previously. It's about usage of cultural heritage for new creativity, and this is just one of many, many, many projects that you can read about in this website. And it's a collaboration between Bordeaux, Dubrovnik, Dublin, and San Sebastian, 4 towns which have come together to work on heritage in another way, consuming differently, and setting up all kinds of things. And naturally, when the cities are launching these programs, they need enterprises to be with them, to support them, to experiment with them, to actually implement what they are thinking about. So that's why I'm suggesting to you, get to your local authorities, get to the NGOs locally, get to various meeting points and see if there are projects launched that could fit into your ambitions. Yeah, okay. You told me just some minutes ago that sometimes it's difficult. It's difficult to get the money. And of course, that's the experience of everyone, even me as a researcher who look for funding. I'm also getting disappointments when I don't get the applications that I'm looking for. But there are some do's and don'ts. No matter with whom you are trying to approach, no matter what kind of funding you are looking for. So let's go through some of these. And again, these are lists which I suggest you might print them out, and when you're making your application, put them on the wall and come back to them and look, did I do the right thing, or did I not? Should I amend my application? Yeah, the do's: a high level of ambition and innovative approaches. Well, the funders might actually want to see the ambition somehow expressed, something different, what they have not seen before, something new in a larger perspective, something which is not seen in the local area that you're in, or perhaps even worldwide. That's not often the case, but nevertheless, some ambition at some level. The don'ts, it's a low level, it's just repetition of something well known. You should try to avoid that. Doesn't mean that you cannot learn from others, but in some respect, there should be some kind of ambition in it. A wide support, a project that is appreciated and benefiting a lot of people. This is normal in the EU applications. EU is trying to solve wicked problems for a lot of people around Europe, and you should actually show that that what you do can actually benefit many people. Perhaps you may get some kind of testimonials from people, or somehow to demonstrate that what you do has some support. And the don'ts, of course, if it only has a very narrow support, only targeting very few, and if it's only for your own benefit, forget about it. Specific and realistic budget. I know that many people don't like budgeting, but you will really have to work with it. It is essential, and you have to try to specify all costs, and you will also have to tell where will the funding go. So it's not only about, well, budgeting the costs. but also saying if we get this funding, it will actually mainly go to the realization of this or that, perhaps purchasing a better machine or an additional machine, or getting access to another market, or whatever is relevant for you. If the budget is very ambiguous, if the elements are too fuzzy or too not specified, it might create alarm clocks ring among the funders. A very necessary thing is that there is a match between the aim of the fund and the project. That seems to be obvious, isn't it? But sometimes you get a bit blind on, well, here's a lot of money, and you forget to say, what do they really want? You have people in the funding, they have their own success criteria. Sometimes you have to think about those who read your application, and to approve the application, they also have to tell to their board of directors or whatever that they actually make good choices. So the project should actually contribute to the fund's strategy somehow. If there's only a superficial match, it's likely that the project will not be supported. And the do's, you have to make a target application, focus on the aim criteria of the fund, be very precise about this. And don't is that if you have, sometimes you say, I already put a lot of effort into making an application and you didn't get the funding, and then you just forward the application to the next fund. Don't do that, because it can be identified immediately by experienced fund persons that you have not done an effort to target your application. The next one is about the do's, creating a sufficient co-financing. Look at what the fund actually wants and demonstrate that you are responsible. They like to see co-financing. That demonstrates a responsibility. You want to risk your own money, or other people want to risk their money for the fulfilling of this project. If you have no or limited co-financing, it can indicate that you have the lack of capacity altogether to perform. So this is also a kind of alarm clock. You have to make specific and measurable performance indicators. And I must admit, I hate this sometimes, that you have to make measurable performance indicators, even if the project is difficult to measure in a quantitative sense. But try to think about, when you reach some milestones, or can you somehow measure effects in a sensible way. It's often quite superficial, I would say, but you have to make an effort. If there are too many soft objectives, it's sometimes quite a problem. My very last slide here is also kind of a reminder slide. I think that most of my presentation is about reminder slides for you. I hope you will actually keep them with you, because you might want to come back with them. But if you do not have competences in budgeting, it's worthwhile actually getting a bit into it and investing in before you make applications. So just to say, there are many categories of resources that you can think about. The human resources, naturally, what kind of investments, your own time, your own salary, or temporary workers who put an effort into the project. Try to calculate that. Traveling spendings, of course, how much do you need to spend on this issues? That might be actually more easy, because if you want to work on a market, you have to take the train or the car to go somewhere. There will be costs related to this. Training fees, if you want to go to conferences, the Tourban activities, for example, you might actually get that into a project financing if it's relevant. Material resources, equipment of various kinds, and I have to say that in terms of material resources, the EU funding is very particular. So if you have something which is movable, sometimes they say, no, we cannot finance that. So look into what is eligible for the funding. Research expenses, what kind of studies or data that you did, how do you get that? Does it cost anything? Professional services, remember do you have money for your accountant, or if you need some consultants or some legal advice? Capital expenditures, the interest rates are rising right now, so you have to actually anticipate where if you have to loan money for an intermediary time, what kind of money will be needed for that? And the last but not least, there might be some reserves. You cannot predict all kinds of budget elements with a great precision. So yeah. Okay. Now we are ready, I think, for a few minutes of questions. Is that or comments? Is that right, Caroline? Yes.
Absolutely.
So come along.
And again, if you can't unmute or feel more comfortable writing, go ahead and write in the chat and I'll read it out loud. But otherwise, you simply just unmute if you have any comments or questions.
I see you, Alexandra. Do you have any comments? Have you experienced with anything of what I have been talking about? How about Constanze? You are in another position. Have you been able to advise some of the Tourban enterprises in this field? Perhaps I could ask the same question to you, Caroline.
Yeah, to me, definitely. Well, not so much about access to finance yet, but as the two of us were just discussing prior to letting participants in, we will be in Copenhagen at the end of June. We'll be hosting the first Tourban investor pitch. But of course, we have been dealing already on all the SMEs that applied for Tourban know this, dealing with understanding I would say maybe slight rigid budget templates and schemes in order to just apply and actually get approved for the Tourban project. So I would say any of the SMEs that are already enrolled in the acceleration program have definitely gone through a bit of what you were talking about for the EU funding, because this was the process here, both the application, the ideas, the documentations, the measurable goals and everything. And for some, it hasn't quite stopped yet, because there's a midterm report coming soon. So everyone has had to fill out some very measurable deliverables for the project. So at least some experience there for a lot of the SMEs and for all the partners in the evaluation process as well on the other side.
Yeah. Oh, I see you, Sabine. You are behind of you. Reinvent tourism. Is there any funding in the EU system which can, where you can see that it can be used for reinventing tourism?
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I was thinking maybe it's an idea to stop the screen sharing so we can see each other.
Ah, yeah, of course, yes.
Yeah, most of us are not using the camera. Yeah, we're a grassroots organization in Amsterdam, based in Amsterdam. And we are looking into funding. We don't have it yet. I certainly see potential, but I'm also aware of that especially European funding is really difficult. I think as a small organization, I don't know, but my experience is that you really need professional help. They are very complicated applications, and also
Yes.
afterwards to report.
Absolutely. But in fact, our university is working with a kind of business cluster, and they are quite experienced in applying and doing all the administrative things, and we have together with I think 4 or 5 other universities, we have smaller fragments of the budget, and we do things as part of the project. And I find that very satisfactory, because I really also hate all the big and complicated administrative things. But the cluster, they have developed a good experience in doing that, and we enjoy doing courses for enterprises and consultations and things like that. So,
yeah,
so
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think that often the mindset which is needed for innovation, a creative mindset out of the box, it doesn't go really well together with the administrative part. I feel that with us. And do you have something like that in the Netherlands as well? We would love to connect.
yeah. Are there other comments, ideas? So, could I leave over to you, Caroline? I think we are.
So, if there are no more comments or questions, and I can also just say on behalf, because now I've been working with Anne-Mette for quite a while, I know that if you come to think of a question, you can find her in the community, and she'll be more than happy to get back to you there as well. There's a message function that you can use, and I'm pretty sure actually your email is probably also in there, so you can reach out to her in case you want to.
You are very welcome, and any ideas could also be welcome. You know, sometimes I'm putting up some small notes on the Tourban community website, and I would be happy to try to cultivate a bit of your ideas if you think there's something that could be benefiting a larger group.
Yeah, so ideas for that are also very, very welcome. I think that goes for all the experts. So thank you, Anne-Mette. That was a really good call to action to all the SMEs. Well, with that said, thank you guys for joining. Also, just to address a little bit of the stuff in the chat. Yes, we'll be sharing the recording soon, and yes, we'll be sharing the slides as well. And they will all be found under the event where you went today to actually go to this webinar. We're going to upload so that you have the recordings and the PDFs and everything there as well. And if you cannot find it for some reason, or you forgot where to go and find it or anything, contact me and I'll be happy to send it to you. And Sabine, I have your email, so don't worry, we'll fix that. And there was also a question about more information about the investor pitch coming up in Copenhagen. Yes, I have just received the program from the facilitator, so I will also be posting some more about that. And if any of you guys are joining, I really look forward to seeing you there. And I think that's everything that we have to say today. So thank you so much, guys, for joining. And thank you once again, Anne-Mette. It was, as I can also see people are commenting in the chat, really, really interesting also for me to listen into. So thank you guys so much and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Hi
you,
to everyone.
guys.